So watching the first two January 6 hearing sessions, it's pretty clear that William Barr really stuck it to the Orange Menace. And I'm aware, very aware of Barr's true nature. People remind me of this on the channel through comments pointing to his corruption. And there's no doubt about that. We all saw what he did when he was Attorney General under Trump, starting with the desecration of the Mueller report, and then engaging in all kinds of very questionable legal behavior that, to my mind, seemed borderline, if not perhaps illegal. And so in that sense, he was very helpful to Trump, and he behaved in a corrupt way. But I also see his corruption as, let us call it, a kind of world-class corruption, whereas Trump's corruption would be something like solar system level or even galactic level. We're talking about different dimensions. And to my understanding, Barr is an individual who is corrupt within the system. He pushes the system to the limit and behaves like a first-class Republican lackey. And he was doing this back in the 90s. He let off all kinds of people in the George H.W. Bush administration, people who would have been prosecuted had there been any fairness in terms of dealing with it, what they had done. But because he was the Attorney General and they were Republican, he let them off the hook. And so he did this again. But now when it came to Trump, either you think that he simply realized that he himself would get in trouble, and that's possible because he might have, if he didn't take this path of outing Trump the way he did. It's possible. Or maybe he genuinely does believe that in the end, you have to have a country, you have to have a democracy, you have to have something to work with in order for things to move forward at all. And keep in mind that the Cheneys are the same way. Liz Cheney is not exactly the first person Democrats would point to in terms of policy, but yet at the moment, she is defending the Constitution in the correct way. And to a certain extent, Barr has as well. And the thing is, what about the astrology of all this? The astrology, if you look at Barr's chart, you see that on account of being a Gemini, and then you look at his Venus and Aries, you look at the Leo planets, the Pluto and Moon there, those work well with Trump. Gemini means they're both the same sign. There's an elemental compatibility. This always happens with the elements. They tend to get along well. And then the Aries Leo components connect well with Trump's Leo energy in his chart, his rising sign and his Pluto, his Mars, etc. But I had said this quite a while back now in videos that I did about Barr, pointing to his Mars in Virgo and pointing to 2022, to a certain extent 2023 as well, but certainly this year, there would likely be high pressure in his chart because of the transit in Neptune. Neptune is in Pisces on the other end, opposing it. And the way you know that's likely to happen is that the Neptune in his birth chart opposes his Venus. And when a planet is in oppositions at birth, when it transits and connects any other planet, it brings the pressure of that opposition, which means tension, which means difficulty, which means the kind of year he's in, because he was brought before the committee, which I have to say, probably he wouldn't have unless he were asked or maybe even subpoenaed. In other words, what I mean by that is Barr and all the other lackeys around Trump could have brought this up long ago, right? And one wonders, had there been no committee at all investigating, would they have said what they're saying? So in essence, pressure is brought to bear. He then tells the tale. In doing so, he does it in the period with Neptune opposite Mars, which means that Mars is being triggered. But what is important here is to realize that that Mars in Trump's chart squares his sun and moon. It's a dynamic planet that prior to this was not operating in challenge mode, in hurt mode, which is effectively what it just did. But this is what happens between people. Nearly all, if not all, relationships feature harmonious planetary aspects together with challenging planetary aspects, because harmonious you need in order to get along, the challenging you need for stimulation in any relationship. And then what happens is it works well until it doesn't, until a point is reached where one of the two parties will not continue with the relationship because something they understand to be too threatening needs to be confronted. This is what's happened here. And so at that point, that Mars squaring Trump's sun and moon becomes a huge problem, because then Barr is using it to aggressively attack Trump. He was quite aggressive in what he did. And he did it because in his own transits, the Neptune in its transit is putting pressure on that Mars. And that's why you could have seen this going back 2-3 years, that there would come a day when this would happen and the circumstances would align in that way. And once again, I'll repeat, I am aware that Barr is corrupt. Absolutely. But at the moment, as I've said in prior videos, in politics, you take what you can get. And my understanding, it's absolutely true that in these situations, I'm perfectly happy to accept the enemy of my enemy as my friend, at least in a temporary sense, because I certainly do not like Bill Barr's policies, just like I don't like Liz Cheney's policies. But on this particular matter, I applaud them both.